All right, let's get started here. For everyone who hasn't been on one of these before, my name is Edward, and I'm one of the co-founders of Hordes of Sharpest Minds. John is a mentee who was recently hired. He's waving right now. John is a mentee who was recently hired, and basically we'll be going over his story in detail in a bit and tips that he has on job hunting. John is in a really a situation that like where he can give a lot of advice to folks who have kids and who are working from home and job hunting through Corona. So John definitely did this on hard mode. Before we jump into that, I will quickly give you guys an update on what the job market is like with COVID. We have seen just in the last just like one more person in. We have seen actually just in the last month a few encouraging signs. Hiring has picked up a little bit, but a noticeable extent. And one other thing that we've seen that is actually two things we've seen that are quite encouraging is number one, we haven't seen any more layoffs happen among our mentee population. So none of our mentees after, I think nobody in May got laid off. Certainly nobody at the end of May. So there haven't been any layoffs, at least in about a month among mentees, which is actually really good. And in addition, so back in March, we had this thing happen where a few mentees got hired, like they got job offers, but then those job offers got pulled away from them as companies started reacting to COVID. We had never seen that ever happen before. It's a unique thing, and it's very unique because it actually can potentially put a company in a dangerous legal position of having actually extended this offer and basically made a contract with this person that they're then breaking. And that's that can be quite dicey, but it's just an indication of how extreme things were. Anyway, we didn't see that happen after the end of March, so it was only during March that particular thing happened. But one thing we did see happen just actually a few days ago is one of our mentees who had a job offer extended to her by a company in March and then got that offer pulled away, now has the company coming back and basically remaking her the exact same offer again on the same terms. So again, that's a good sign. It means companies, or at least this company and probably several more, are looking at the situation and going like, okay, we anticipate that we'll be able to weather this, and our hiring plan is back on track. So this won't be happening to all companies. Obviously, airlines and cruise lines are still like totally busted and are in real trouble. So, I don't think you'll be seeing many job postings for airlines, but like I recommend not applying to any because like they probably won't go anywhere. So there's segments of the market that are affected, but there are signs of at least a slow recovery as I think the world is just adapting to work from home. It's still not, we're not going to recover completely until we see like a vaccine or whatever, or the pandemic actually ends after a fashion. But it is nice to see that the economy is recovering enough and hiring is recovering slowly but steadily over the past few months. So that's actually really good for mentees, for absolutely everybody. So yeah, basically just want to give you guys that quick update. It's important for you folks to be aware of how things are evolving in the job market. So without further ado, and of course, throughout this whole conversation, including right now, you can always post a message to the chat if you have any questions or want to say anything, and we'll bring it up. If you want, you can also unmute yourself and say like, hey, I have a question. But I find people are less willing to do that, even when I encourage them to do it. So you might as well just use the chat, and that is totally fine. We'll jump right in here and talk to John. No problem. Like, happy to give the update. So Ty just saying thanks for the job situation update. We'll just jump right into talking to John here. So John, if you can wave so you people know who you are. Yes. So this is John, and I really apologize if I'm mispronouncing your last name, but is it DeJesus?
Perfect.
Yes. Okay. Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
It's okay. I wouldn't think any less of you otherwise.
I appreciate it. I really do. And for what it's worth, I do belong to the mispronounced names club. People pronounce my first name incorrectly quite often. Anyhow, John is a former mentee, actually one of our earlier mentees who got hired, and his he's been playing the mentorship on hard mode. He has kids, and of course with COVID, that means like, oh sorry, sorry, one daughter. He has a kid at home, and basically has been like at home with your daughter, of course, during Corona, and so some of your job search happened during that time. So I will just I'll let John introduce himself, and then we'll dive into some questions. So welcome, John, and thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks. I don't know. Do you want me to give like a quick overview of what has happened up to this
Yeah,
point?
basically,
I
if you
started
could,
today.
yeah, if you just give a sense of like how the story, like in rough outlines, how it went. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to keep it as short as possible, just so people can ask more questions for detail. So I started this journey pretty much in 2017. For starters, I was a high school math teacher. I had about 3 years on my belt at that time. I have currently a about to be 6-year-old daughter, so she was 3 when I started this. And I just kind of came to the decision because I was going through teaching. I got to the highest point I wanted, and I wasn't really satisfied, but I saw a lot of problems in general. And I figured, okay, I have all this math. Like I have a master's in math as well. I figured, what could I do? So I was searching stuff up, looking for careers in math. Data science was the thing that stood out. So I was like, all right, let me go down this rabbit hole. So I did. I started basically kind of doing like an overview stuff. So I did a lot of courses on Udemy, particularly those from super data science, anything from like machine learning, general data science overview. Around, let's say, was this like December at this point? This is like December 2017. I started getting into like doing things on Tableau. So especially if you like visualization, there's this thing called hashtag Makeover Monday. Basically, what it is, every week they put out a visualization, they put out an article related to it, and what you do is you do your own spin on it on the data, whether it's your own story, your own perspective. You submit it on Twitter or on this data.world, which is a new form. And not only does it one increase the portfolio for you, especially if you're into visualization, there's also the chance to get your stuff reviewed. So they do a webinar for about like 75 minutes every week to look at review your stuff. And of course, you should act on that feedback. So I did that for a while. Found that data visualization was really my thing. I discovered more Python was my thing, so I focused more on that. Lucky enough, around this is almost a year now, I finally got a interview with Google. That was actually my first like phone interview period. I got that through a reference, luckily, but that helped. Went through that experience, got through the first round, botched the second one because I was aiming more for ML engineer at the time. From there, this was like, okay, trying different things, and I figured I needed a focus. So that's when I came across Sharpest Minds. I actually came across it through one of Jeremy's articles about, I think, like, don't be a data science generalist. That was where I found it. So I applied. They hooked me up, and it was the greatest thing because the thing I needed more so than anything was pretty much focus. And again, this is also while juggling, having a kid. Obviously, you don't want to be that parent that's like doing work, and then when your daughter comes to ask you to play, you don't be that jerk and just like, oh no, I'm working, because they will remember that. So obviously, I could have did it longer. Sorry, did it much shorter, but I prioritized being a parent over that. Spent the last year kind of building up this web app pretty much that's currently live. Basically to help teachers like visualize data really quickly, and as a small like ML component with like K-mean. So through that, went through the interview process, tried to optimize LinkedIn. That was the one surprising thing in particular because of that and my experience with putting out my stuff out there. Like I actually got to give a lightning talk at Google that was hosted by my school's network. Facebook actually contacted me for out of nowhere for this random job. It was like this super long title, something about global marketing, but basically it was for a position where to educate other people on their marketing platform. And the starting salary from what I remember was like 135K, 10% bonus, and like 55K in equity. So I went to the first round, no problem. Pretty much as long as you're like honest and you relate more to like what they're looking for, then like you can pass those pretty easily. Second round, I botched. Maybe I didn't say the right thing or whatever the case was, but I moved on, kept going through, kept trying. Taking advice again from Sharpest Minds as far as like the cold emailing, other resume tips, things of that nature. And then finally, once I started focusing more on the education stuff, because I was still kind of flying around of what exactly I wanted to do, I started doing stuff at the school. So again, especially if you're working right now in your domain, if you can find data problems during while you're working and like volunteer to solve them, like that'll stand out and also build up another like portfolio for yourself to use. And I can talk about that later about having like a physical portfolio. So then finally, I started applying. I got one interview. I went through a recruiter call, data task, which was like 2 hours, and then I got the on-site, which was like 5 people. I unfortunately failed that. I'm thinking probably for personality reasons, maybe that was the case. But the cool thing was that they kept me in a pool so that other recruiters can like grab at me. So one recruiter did from a different team, and because of that, it was like everything, all my experiences kind of came together. And like again, I could speak more to this as far as like training for this interview and prepping myself. But after that, I landed it, and this was at the beginning of March. And then the Friday before New York City shut down, which was the 16th, I finally got the call for the position. And after waiting about 3 weeks, on April 13th is when I officially started. So I'm roughly a little under 2 months into this position.
It's a great experience because it kind of brings together all the different threads of what's important, and
Right.
they all happen to coalesce like right in that final interview,
Literally.
as sometimes happens.
Mm.
So just for folks who are joining, you can always post questions on the chat for John. Once we're about halfway through, we'll start going through those questions and answering them and discussing. Um, for now, I want to dive into a few areas that you really kind of surfaced in your description there.
Right.
First off, the importance of focus is something you
Yep.
mentioned, and I thought that was really interesting because uh, you more than maybe anyone else have necessarily have to like divide your attention. Like you had
Right.
a full-time job, you have a daughter,
Mm.
and you're also doing this on the side. So how did you square the need for focus with all these other demands on your time?
Well, admittedly, I didn't learn it right away, so that's one takeaway you guys can
It's
take. Like,
hard.
it's hard at first because especially when you first dive into this field, you see all this like really cool stuff. Like, oh, there's machine learning. Oh, there's Tableau. There's visualization. It's all this stuff, and you want to play with everything. But if you're gonna do it, I would advise doing it quickly so that you learn really quick what you really do like and what you don't, and then you can focus in on that. To give some more context, I only had roughly about an hour a day, if at that, to do any studying, any interview prep, or anything of the sort. And that again, that's if I had it. There were some days where I didn't, whether because there were like family events or things like that, or like there was at least one day a week like I gave to my wife, who was like my biggest support system of all. Because if I didn't have that and she didn't support me and she's like, "Nah, go like clean the dishes or something," like I probably wouldn't have had this opportunity. So I have her to thank for that a lot. As far as anything else I want to say for that, but yeah, generally the thing is focus, experiment quickly, and that's even just also with like putting your stuff out there. I don't know if any of you guys have started like putting blog posts on Medium or making your own sites of the case, things like that. But even experiment with that often. So like I even tried doing like a YouTube channel and doing Medium, like on and off, just to see which one worked. I ended up defaulting to Medium at the end of the day because YouTube took a lot. But even if you feel like in general, and this is kind of going a little off topic, but since I'm talking about it, um, don't worry about like if it's good enough or not. Just put it out there because at the very least, someone's gonna get help from it. There's a YouTube video on like empirical cumulative distribution functions, which I did a year ago, and I still get LinkedIn messages every once in a while being like, "Thank you, this clarified it so much." Like little things like that. So even though it looks like you're talking into the void when you send these things out, and trust me, it'll feel that way. Eventually, in one way or another, it does help, and it also does get you attention. Okay, whether it's again through the Facebook thing. The other thing that it also got the attention of was this publishing company, which actually wanted me to do a TensorFlow course. So
Oh,
these little things like that, like will pick up little by little. So it seems like it'll take a while, and you'll have those days where it's like, oh, it's frustrating, I'm not getting anywhere. But these two things do build up. It's kind of like a build up little by little, like you're building little by little. Sorry, I keep saying building a lot, but so it's essentially it's what it is in the long run.
this is like building is a great word. It's exactly what you want to be doing. Like
Right.
when you write a blog post, when you create a video, you're sowing the seeds of compounding growth in so many ways. Of course, you're becoming better at creating videos, you're becoming better at explaining stuff.
Mm.
You become more comfortable with like putting yourself out into the world and being unembarrassed, which is the biggest barrier for most of us. But
Mm.
also, um, you're you're basically doing like a very low cost like roll of the dice, and it might be that roll of the dice, like probably we'll end up with nothing, but that blog post and that video lives forever on the internet. So you kind of get like from the moment you publish it, you have like then up till T to infinity of just collecting interest and like people discovering it, people messaging it. Um, what I really love about it as well is like so your background, of course, you're a teacher, like you have background in education, you have experience and practice like digesting concepts
Right.
down and explaining them to people. I'm guessing, like, did you find that you drew on that to create these explanation videos?
Yeah, pretty much, because my thought was like, especially my personality and my family background is like we always wanted to help people. So it's like, yeah, I can put the information out there, but if no one can interpret it, then it's not good to anybody. So, and again, it's probably maybe it's just like teacher habits and myself just trying to think about like where people are gonna not understand certain things, what misconceptions might come up. So if you think about that, usually if you have the problem, then maybe someone else has that same misunderstanding. So you try to like focus on that, make that clear at the very least. If you're going for like a tutorial type of blog post, if it's something like a project, then you can just kind of like describe it, I guess. But if you again want to put more of the effort and really want people to understand what you're doing, then you go the extra mile. Think about those things. It is a skill in itself. It's not easy to do, but if you don't practice it, then you won't get good at it anyway. If that's what you're going for.
Yeah, it's not something that anyone is really going to teach you. It's not necessarily a teachable skill either. Like you're at your best when you create stuff, when you do the things that are unique to you. Like in your case, you've got this background as an educator. You you can educate.
Yeah,
You can
I tried
distill.
to anyway.
Yeah, no, but that's the key. Like even if your first like 2 3 videos are terrible, they're
Mm,
probably terrible not because you didn't like educate or distill the concepts, but because like you didn't have the production stuff down, you didn't have the
right.
editing down, all that stuff. Those are the mechanical aspects
Mm,
of the creation. But what's cool is like you were able to focus on what makes you unique to
mm,
like leverage the value that you currently have, and that's
mm.
true for everyone. If you're able to focus on your unique attributes,
Right. And then
there's
so if I could add to that, just expanding on that also, especially for those of you that are in a like working now in a particular domain, especially if you're strapped for time, like try to take advantage of it. Especially if you still like the career that, let's say you like the field that you're in, you just don't like the position itself within that field. But like that's the opportunity right there. That's because you already have that what they call the domain knowledge, right? You don't have to relearn someone else's field and anything like that. That's going to give you a faster start. And again, that's probably what helped me here. So if you again still like the career that you're in, or even like it's something related to that, try to focus on that as much as possible. Yes, there might be a trade-off of like you don't get to get through this cool like ML technique or something, but maybe it'll come along the line. So for example, I really liked NLP, but a lot of in the education world that's not even a thought yet entirely. There's some hints of it. That's the other thing. Like don't do things so much to like use a tool, like make sure do the project, and if the project happens to come up with a tool, then great, but don't do the reverse. Like it should always be like the focus solving a problem in general, or completing whatever project. Then you learn from the little pieces that'll come as you go.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually on that topic, you were talking earlier about doing doing projects in the education field. So essentially,
Right.
if I understand correctly, you're a teacher in school, and you're then building tools for teachers in essence to help them grade things and things like that. I wonder if you can go to a little bit more detail on the sorts of things you were building there.
Yeah, so basically it was a general web app. That was the first project, and that was the one I did with my mentor from this program, Fred. Basically, the problem was I was seeing was that they wanted teachers to like differentiate students. Like, okay, you gave an assessment, you gave a project to them, you graded it. Okay, now with that information, you're supposed to be up the kids in such a way that you address all their misconceptions and then build them up at that time. But of course, they're going to have different ones, and just getting grading alone takes a lot of time. And then on top of that, to analyze it all takes even longer. This is, they're still in kind of like the quote unquote dinosaur age where they're still looking at Excel files or even paper for that matter. So I built a tool basically that would take any Excel file or Google sheet, and within like simple clicks and drop downs, and I could share it later if anything. Basically allowed them to quickly, with a click, they get a pie chart. So they can see like what percentage of kids picked a certain multiple choice answer out of multiple choice. They can see the percentage, see the amounts. I use an ECDF in there to kind of address the question, okay, what percentage of my kids, passed the test? What percentage of the kids didn't? Looking at that. There was also something to check skills over time. So I built like a line chart. And there was a thing, so grouping is another issue that takes a lot of time over there. So I use k-means and which is unsupervised learning algorithm. And basically what it does is it takes two columns of data, classifies them under the k-means algorithm once you pick the number of categories you want, or like clusters. And then it physically separated them, because the thing was, you're looking through, you don't want to look through an Excel file, right? I mean, think about the data you work with. That's why we were in this field. We don't want to be looking at, 1,000-row Excel files trying to filter through them, or 100-row Excel files for that matter. So that physically separated. So again, that was picking up on the pain points pretty much. So like thinking about, again, not doing the cool ML stuff, like finding like a classifier or whatever, because it's not the fanciest thing, but it does address the problem. And of course, if you really want teachers to use it, which I was trying to do originally, was, go to different teachers in each department and try to get their opinions on this. Because again, you're automatically biased as being the creator of your app, right? So it's like you can't be your own viewpoint. You have to get other viewpoints. In fact, in work that I'm doing on now, there's actually what they call a UX analyst. So a person who actually deals with this type of stuff, like getting user feedback, studying how they interact with the app. And that's a person on a team right now in a project that we're working on. That's pretty crucial.
That's cool. So like what strikes me about that is that you were almost like running your own mini startup.
Kind of, and admittedly, like, so this is where, like, I think Ed knows, I kind of contacted him about this. I was at a point in time when I was like getting a little frustrated with the job search and just kind of thinking about the startup, like turning it into a startup, because no one in the market had that. And the reason I know that's true is because New York City has this system called Pupil Paths, and there's another one called Scheduler. So because of mere connections, I actually got to talk to the creator of those products and his marketing partner, and even the marketing partner said that what I had was something that didn't exist, or at the very least, he wasn't sure what my competition was. At the very least, I picked out some things I thought they were, but he was like, "No, it's not them." I think it was like EduLast was one of them, EduLastic or something, whatever the heck it was. But yeah, like, you'd be surprised. But again, that's a long road. I decided against it because of what the creator Jed had said, which was like the toll it took on his marriage. So for me, like, that was the ultimate choice of still sticking with job hunting as opposed to going to that route, because I know I could have did it, with the amount of time, but I wasn't willing to make that type of sacrifice. So that's like a trade-off you have to make if you do decide to go that route. Sorry, I was a little off topic, but again, trying to
No,
give it as effective as I can.
I mean, this is correct. It of course takes a huge amount of time, but what's cool about that is that um, the things you have to do to build a startup, not even to build a startup, but to just like build the MVP for a startup.
Mm.
Those are the things that companies really value. As in, like, in your case, like, you almost, it sounds like you didn't really care, like, or you cared, but not enough. Like, you cared about, say, using BERT or something, right? But like not enough that you would actually use it if you didn't have to use it. Like, if you
Right.
don't have to use it, you're not going to use it.
Yeah, and if
Um,
anything, I found it's actually harder to even get a project started when you go that route. That's why I said, like, it's usually easier in the reverse, because it's like, all right, I want to use BART, but for what? You got to find the data set. You got to think about it. It actually takes a lot more time than the reverse. I mean, obviously there's a chance to that, like you might not get to use it, but the main thing is, like, as a data scientist in general, or any one of these fields, right? You're doing this to solve problems, not to just use like cool stuff. It's cool because you get to solve these problems using these cool things. But remember, the main objective and the main thing you're doing is that you're problem solving at the end of the day. Data is just a mean, and these tools are just a means to do that.
that's exactly right. It's what matters is the solving of the problem. And
Right.
in your case, you were able to solve the problem in a domain that, like, in your existing domain. And
Right.
what I've seen of other mentees who've done this sort of thing is this is an extremely effective strategy.
Mm-hmm.
If you're, let's say, like, I mean, you've got a great example here. One guy, so Nicholas, who I spoke to some time ago, he was doing like tutoring in physics, I think, And one of the things he did was he built an app to basically, like, if I recall correctly, he did like computer vision on the multiple choice answers for his thing, and just automatically graded his tutoring assignments. And that's the thing that takes like an ordinary kind of oh, I'm making ends meet kind of job, and
Mm.
takes that to like, no, I'm making ends meet, but I'm a creative person and I'm thinking of this from the standpoint of the problem to be solved and actually solving it. And that's what you did here. And this is the kind of thing that, like, when you put it on your resume and surface it, when you talk to people in interviews about it, people go like, oh wow, like, here's a person who can accomplish far more than like just the official stuff says that they can. And that's a strong signal.
Right, and that's the thing you gotta emphasize. Because remember, the people, especially the HR people, they don't understand like all the technical stuff that we do, right? But as long as you're like, oh, I solved this problem, and then like that, they'll understand that. It doesn't matter who you are. It's like, oh, I solved this problem. Speaking of that, especially for the analysts, like people are like doing like analysis and stuff. So the other thing that helped was, again, like I said before, doing solving problems at my school. So there were moments like hiring decisions, things of that nature, where I wrote reports for, and that helped to influence like the hiring decision. So one example is we were noticing in our freshman students that the math skills seemed lower than normal, like compared to the ones we've had in the past. So like they were iffy about it, and everyone was saying to the principal, "Oh, you need to hire someone to like get this, get their skills up." Principal didn't buy it, but she was someone who says she needed data. So I figured, all right, let me take a stab at this. So they gave me the old test data. I made a report and just I did my analysis. I organized the graphs and charts into a Google Doc just to just so it's clear. And if you're curious about the format, basically I put the question of what I was trying to answering, the data that was used, and then organize the story from there, starting from very general overview, so like a bar chart type of thing, then going a little more direct. But again, keeping in mind of who the audience is, right? Which is another thing again with the blog post. You have to be mindful who you're writing for this for, so that they understand it. Again, if they don't understand it, it's useless to them. It was not going to convince them. And apparently it was good enough is they actually hired someone. It wasn't a full teacher, but it ended up being like a alumni, actually, like an additional tutor. So it was something. We got the additional help, which was the goal. And even then, like, it went to the superintendent. People at the office were actually surprised with that report. Someone, I think, even though this is arguably maybe not true, but I think it is, like, there was a data report soon after by someone who was the data person at at the network. So it was just like funny how that was a weird response. But yeah, that was, things like that happen. The other plus side to that, especially for interviews, when you have the on-site interviews, print out hard copies of these things. So any reports or anything like that, should you write, print out hard copies, because I took those in a binder. I had a binder of the four that I did, and was able to present and talk about it when certain questions came up during the interview. Again, you can talk all you want and all that stuff, but if you have the actual physical things to show and like point out and be like, oh, here's where I did this, here's where I did that, like that's powerful, because anyone can just talk about it. But if you can show them, or again, like if this was like a virtual interview, right, show them the app that you worked on or whatever the case is, like use that to your advantage. Okay, because that stands out. Also will differentiate a little, because I don't know, I'm not sure if anyone else did that, but I'd imagine it would be an advantage. I'm pretty sure it was, and it also made it easier to go through the interview. I wasn't nearly as nervous because I was confident about what I was
Yeah,
talking, like done them.
because you have props.
Right. Yeah. Like I literally had props. I was like, here's the evidence right here. Here's what I did. And then it naturally just kind of happens like, oh, I'm the expert on the report because I made it. And then, of course, be open to feedback. So the interview that I had was, I think that's what they were hunting for the most part, like how I would take feedback and how I would take improvement. So I asked like directly after I talked about it, like what that was. And then in the thank you emails that I sent, I actually redid it really quick and sent it back to them with those improvements. So I'm wondering if that also kind of helps with like nailing the decision down.
I think there's a good chance. Being open to feedback is great in terms of a culture, personality fit everywhere, pretty much. And in terms of bringing props, yes, in a virtual world, you can show your live app. It's also very effective if you have a slide deck. This is effective whether it's virtual, or like you just bring in a laptop in an in-person
Right.
meeting. A lot of mentees that we've seen succeed really well in interviews and in early interviews is like, it's a company they really, really want to work at, and they go out of their way to create a slideshow of like, hey, I looked at your website. I like, I investigated like this and that, and I think you guys could do a better job by doing this. Here's some improvements that I can think of. You can really, really do like you can impress people very substantially over and beyond anyone else pretty much who has applied for that job and gotten an interview.
Right. And just to add to the PowerPoint thing, I mean, Ed, I don't know about these specifically, but general good PowerPoint practice, keep the words to the minimum as much as possible. Like,
Yes.
because again, people by default will just naturally want to read the words. And two, don't be one of those people that like just reads off the PowerPoint slides. That's not good. Don't do that. So
That's
like
absolutely.
the PowerPoint should be just there to like paragraph, give a sense of what you talk about, and then just signal what you're going to talk about.
That's 100% true. Yes, if you're able to, like, yeah, you should be. You should not be reading off the slide.
Right. You don't.
Yeah. Great. So last question before we open it up that I wanted to ask is, uh, you kept at this for a really long time. Basically, you're saying like doing 1 hour a day,
2.5 years total between
2.5 years total, right?
your mentor. Well, I mean, with your mentorship, it was like what, a year at
It would
that
have,
point.
yeah,
Like,
it
yeah.
would have been about a year
Oh,
because you were
right.
doing like small chunks at a time.
Right.
So how did you motivate yourself to continue through that length of time?
A lot of things. One, it was just personal intellectual hunger. The fact that like I was in this teaching, it's funny because I wanted to be a teacher, and then finding it wasn't intellectually satisfying, and knowing I could do more with what I had to offer and being restricted was part of it. Second thing was my kid. Especially, I wanted her to see someone that could, do what they wanted to do, even if it took me longer. Like career change, it's like you're changing your life literally, right? Among that is just pretty much, yeah, like not to pull like a Spider-Man reference, but it's like, like the whole great power, great responsibility type of thing. I felt I had that, and I wanted to make use of my math skills, and data science seemed like the opportunity to do that. And it seems like at least now I'm starting to, which is good. I've already been involved in the machine learning project. I'm starting to build tools right now. I do all the analysis and stuff also. So yeah, don't let the titles fool you. Make sure you read them before anything else. I mean, if you really want the title that badly, maybe you can. I'll see about this later on. Maybe I'll see if I have the option to change it, but I'm not really picky about that at the moment, especially considering what's been happening.
Yeah, yeah, and that's absolutely correct. Big companies like enterprise scale companies tend to have wonky, like they tend to call data scientists data analysts more commonly than smaller
Yeah,
companies.
Google is like that too. Actually, now that I think about it.
Ah, interesting. Oh, that's true. They are like that.
Yeah, like they seem to reserve. Like I remember, like because MLE was the position I applied for at Google, but they put me down to software engineer. But even then, like I was talking about switching when I got the next year around to try again, and I was like, oh, okay, let me switch to data scientist. They're like, no, we reserved that for PhD. So yeah, every company is different, so that's why I'm stressing. Like read the. No, they gave me that option, and they were saying apparently it happens more than I thought. So I don't know.
Oh
But
yeah,
again, read the descriptions. Read the descriptions before you go. And just because it says analyst, read it first, especially if you're like dead set on getting the data and scientist title. So, but yeah.
yes. And companies have all kinds of insane arbitrary rules around this.
Oh
Google,
yeah.
I didn't realize that Google was a PhD company. Airbnb also will only, or last I checked, only hired PhDs as data scientists. Facebook will hire data scientists out of undergrad. It's absolutely bonkers all over the place. So fantastic. All right. So now at this point, I want to open it up. So Mina has a question that she posted a little while ago, and folks, you can post questions on the chat. I will ask them to John. If there's no open question on the chat, I will just keep asking John questions that I'm curious about, but I want to make sure we cover stuff that that you guys are interested in too.